Prior to World War II, 85, 90% of the black population of this country lives in the South.
Black people had primarily lived in the South because of slavery, and the South was a rural, agrarian, or farm economy.
World War II ushers in a series of transformations that radically change the nature of black history in this country. Blacks, for the first time, are invited en masse to work in America's industrial arsenal for democracy, building those tanks, building those planes, building those ships. Between the 1940s and the 1970s, you see over 4 million African Americans leave the South in ways that had never occurred before. Head for New York, head for Chicago, head for Los Angeles. For the first time, they were integrated into the American work economy. They were earning enough to be lower middle class homeowners in LA and to establish, if not exactly, a very close similarity to the American dream.
LA didn't have the overt history with racism that one had in the South.
There were no laws that said blacks had to ride on one part of the bus. There were no laws that said blacks had to be in certain schools. There were, however, an extremely exclusive web of racially restricted housing covenants that kept blacks in particular areas and out of other areas.
These covenants mandated the sale of real estate along racial lines in an effort to keep traditionally white neighborhoods free of non-desirable homeowners.
Sometimes non-desirable meant Latino, sometimes non-desirable meant Jew, sometimes non-desirable meant Asian, but it always meant black. And so those racially restrictive covenants, which didn't disappear until the late 40s and early 50s, essentially kept blacks circumscribed in a very narrow portion of the LA County region.
Black people were sort of forced to live on top of each other because it just wasn't possible to live where you chose, even though you might have been able to afford it.
South LA residents responded by transforming their allotted territory into a thriving cultural hub, with Central Avenue developing into a sort of Harlem West.
West Coast's best jazz clubs. Dozens of black businesses lining the street. People dressed in their Sunday best on the weekends. A period during which the most affluent and the poorest blacks live essentially side by side.
And then, with World War II's end, LA's wartime economy adapted itself to a booming automotive industry with major corporations like GM, Chrysler, Ford, Goodyear, and Firestone, all establishing factories in South Los Angeles.
You work in a factory, you got good benefits, you could buy a house, you could buy a car, you could raise a family, you could live a working class or lower middle class life.
It was a moment of unprecedented black prosperity in which the trajectory of black America was on the rise. People were getting jobs, people were buying homes, people were buying cars, sending their kids to colleges. It was a moment of real optimism.
In the late 1950s, you begin to get the first wave of what came to be called deindustrialization.
The American economy is changing. We're moving from an industrial economy to an economy based on service, based on information, rooted in technology.
That is, it's high-skilled, high-wage, high-training on one hand, very low-skilled sweatshop labor on the other hand. Blacks find that their skills don't fit into either of those demands. They don't have the education or the skill or the training because of historic discrimination to work in aerospace. On the other hand, they don't feel any desire or need to go into the low-skilled service sector jobs like hotel cleaning, like sweatshop work in downtown LA, because they don't perceive that as jobs that American citizens should have.
We're not talking about people who had careers. We're talking about people who had jobs. If you have a job, you are dependent upon that job. So when that factory closes, you are, in essence, ass out.
By the late 60s, you see those plants beginning to disappear. When they disappear, there's virtually nothing left in their wake.
And so it leaves a gaping hole in the economy of that region, with consequences that are just enormous.
Generationally, in America, it's supposed to be about the American dream. People are supposed to move up. They're supposed to elevate. We're talking about a situation where, in actuality, it went in reverse. The children, over time, began to do worse than their parents.
In 1975, the Los Angeles Times sent reporters into the streets to assess progress in the city's black communities, 10 years after the Watts Rebellion. The fearful live behind protective bars and double locks. High schools are graduating functional illiterates. Some black people have got businesses. Some professionals have gotten into significant jobs. But if you talk about the masses, or that guy who was in trouble in 1965, it is more difficult now. For the black in the ghetto, the goal is survival.
A lot of minds are messed up because they don't have that support. They don't have no one that really got their back. They don't really have no one who understands them.
You got the homies down the alley drinking some 8-Ball and they tell you you are something. We love you and you can be a part of this. Then where you go?
Common thread throughout all of these conversations and throughout our community seems to be, for the most part, the absence of a father, a male figure, a father figure in the home. I wasn't taught at all about manhood. I was raised by my great-grandmother, my grandmother, and my mother. There was no male figure. There was no role model for me.
So if you come up in a home when there is no male influence, there's no strong male influence, then everything is going to be out of whack.
The people that taught me wrong. Told me how to be hard. Told me how it was about being tough. You don't teach me how to be a man by just fighting. Tell me fight somebody or go shoot somebody. That's the way they taught me being a man.
You have a subculture of young black men pretending to be men by killing each other or by standing up in a bravado manner. But they're misguided.
Well, I'll sit here and I'll tell you that I didn't become a man until I was 38 years old. Because I had to hold the hand of a man. It was just that simple. A man had to stoop low enough to take me out of the gutter and say, hey, this is the way to go. This is what you do. This is how it's done.
Nowadays, the father
brothers or the black men my age are either dead or in jail. And one of the problems we have is if they're going to try to arrest the problem, that means they're putting all the black men in jail.
A 2003 Bureau of Justice report reveals that 28% of African American men, more than 1 in 4, will be jailed or sent to prison in their lifetime.
We have engaged in this country in an absolutely historically unprecedented experiment in mass imprisonment. We now have an imprisonment rate that is 6 to 7 times higher than it has ever been before in our history.
It's a hustle called capitalism. Got my niggas in prison or stuck in the system, yeah.
In 2007, California's governor announced plans to spend $7.4 billion to build 40,000 new prison beds.
I'm from a place where the fucking Terminator is the governor.
Look at the population of the people in the penitentiary, particularly from the 1980s going forward, black men are disproportionately represented. That's the new cotton field right here, the pen.
Concrete slave ships never move. When niggas like us get used like a mule, don't let them catch you, arrest you.